Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we have just a mountain of sources on a topic that I think is, well, it's widely misunderstood.
Yeah.
We're talking about drama therapy.
Yeah, the name itself kind of throws people off, I think.
It really does. You hear drama and you immediately think, I don't know, over-the-top acting or something just for kids.
Exactly. Or that it's only for super outgoing, extroverted people.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today is to get past all that. We want to find out what drama therapy, or DT, really is. And we're going to look at some of the really specific professional tools they use, like the 6 keys model.
And we absolutely have to start with that misconception you mentioned, the idea that you need to be some kind of natural performer.
Right.
The sources are so clear on this. Many of the clients who get the most out of it are actually profoundly introverted.
See, that's what I find so counterintuitive. You're asking someone to perform, to step outside themselves. That feels like an extrovert's game.
But that's the whole confusion. It's not about an escape into fiction. It's the opposite. One of the main books in the field is literally called Acting for Real.
Acting for real.
Yes. The entire point is radical authenticity. It's about finding and dealing with your core truth.
So
Yeah.
how does that work? How can you use something that seems fictional, like a role play, to get to something that's, radically true? Isn't that a contradiction?
Well, what's fascinating here is that the boundary between drama and real life it's actually incredibly thin when you approach it with integrity.
How so?
Think about it. When you're in a scene, you're using your actual body, your breath, your emotions. It's not like, say, painting where you make a product that's separate from you. In DT, you are the material. The experience is completely real.
Okay.
The liberation comes from the fact that real life boxes us in. Society gives us these limited roles to play. You're a parent, you're an employee, maybe you're a victim. Drama it blows the doors off those limitations. It lets you try on a different self.
So the healing comes from taking a real struggle and building a therapeutic piece of theater around it. It's not static. It has a story, maybe even suspense.
Precisely. And that brings us to a really important distinction the literature makes, which is between drama therapy and psychodrama.
To most people, I have to say, those sound exactly the same.
They're cousins, for sure, but the mechanism is totally different. Psychodrama is very direct. If you have an issue with your mother, you might literally role-play your mother. You reenact a specific fight to process it.
That sounds intense.
It's very confrontational. Drama therapy, on the other hand, deliberately creates distance. It uses metaphor. It might use a myth or a fairy tale or a scene from a play.
So instead of playing your mother, you might explore, I don't know, the story of Cinderella and her stepmother.
Exactly that. Or you might create a metaphor about a caged bird.
But doesn't that distance make it less powerful? Like you're avoiding the real issue.
That's the great paradox of it all. By standing back, by using that as if frame, the person feels safer. And because they feel safer, they can actually get closer to the core wound without being totally overwhelmed.
The distance brings you closer.
The distance brings you closer. It's counterintuitive, but it works.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because that idea of play and distance, it's why the source is called drama, a mental health preserver in literally every culture. The techniques are things we know, mime, role play, movement, but they're being aimed at these very specific therapeutic goals.
Absolutely. And they're used with groups that, traditional talk therapy might not reach. People with severe learning difficulties or behavioral issues or survivors of abuse. It's a highly skilled practice.
Okay, but that brings up a huge problem, especially with adults.
The resistance.
The resistance. Getting them to enter what you call the dramatic reality, that as-if world.
It's the central hurdle. An adult walks in and you can just see them thinking, this is childish. Or they just say, oh, I'm not an actor, I'm too shy.
Yeah, that's the default.
We're all taught to stop playing, to be serious. For a child, the problem is getting them to leave the dramatic reality. For an adult, it's getting them to even peek inside.
And to do that, you'd need an incredible amount of trust. The person has to know they won't be, I don't know, judged or analyzed for what they do in that space.
Trust is everything. DT is often described as an invitation to dream in a waking state. You're making the invisible visible. And that can be, well, it can be really frightening if that safety isn't there.
So given that fear, how does a therapist even begin? You can't just tell an anxious client to, jump up and act out their deepest fear.
They'd run for the door. No, you're exactly right, which is why with adults you often don't start with physical embodiment or role play. You start with projection.
Projection, so putting the feeling onto something else.
Yes. Instead of asking you to be the problem, the therapist asks you to find the problem outside of yourself. They might just say, "Can you walk around the room and find 3 objects related to why you're here?"
That sounds so simple. One of the sources calls that a small step for a human being, a big step for drama therapy. Why is that such a big deal?
Because it breaks the cycle of just talking. In seated therapy, you can talk about your feelings forever, but the second you stand up, you engage the space, you pick up an object, let's say a tangled piece of string to represent your anxiety.
Right.
You are now physically interacting with your problem in the real world.
Right.
That is a massive therapeutic step. It makes the abstract tangible.
That reframes everything. But what about clients for whom that boundary is already blurry? The sources mention a connection to the experience of madness.
That is such a critical point. For someone with, say, schizophrenia who hears voices, entering an as-if world can be terrifying.
Because they're already struggling to know what's real.
Exactly. They're afraid they won't be able to get back. So for them, DT becomes this amazing training tool. It teaches them to differentiate. It says, okay, this rope is the trap in this room for this hour. It helps them build a reality within a reality, which is a crucial skill for stability.
That ability to enter and exit the space, that sounds like a core skill they're assessing. Which tells me this is anything but just fun and games. It's built on some really serious professional frameworks.
It has to be. One expert said that without assessment, DT is just a superficial bunch of techniques. In the early days, they'd borrow checklists from psychology or sociology, but it didn't quite fit. There were stitches, as the literature calls them, between the diagnosis and the actual therapy.
So how do they fix that?
They built their own models. The biggest one is the 6 keys model. It's brilliant because it understands that for a drama therapist, the content, the story of what happened is only, as they say, one leg of the thing.
Okay, so unlike regular therapy where the story is everything.
Right. DT cares more about how that story is expressed dramatically.
So walk me through it. Let's say a client comes in, talks about feeling trapped, but they won't get out of their chair. How would a therapist use the 6 keys?
Perfect example. So after the session, the therapist uses these keys to map it all out. Key 1 is the ability to enter and exit dramatic reality. In your case, it's very low. They wouldn't stand up.
Okay.
Key 2 is the quality of the dramatic reality. Also low. It was all talk, no action. Key 3, the roles and characters. They were probably in the role of stuck person or observer.
Right.
Key 4 is the content and symbols. That's the actual story of being trapped. Key 5 is their reaction to the action. Did they think it was silly? Or were they intrigued? And key 6 is the unspoken things, like the dynamic between the therapist and the client.
That is so much more layered than just, what did you talk about today? It's analyzing how they exist in the space.
Exactly. And another map they use is EPR, embodiment, projection, and role. It links everything back to childhood development.
So how does that help with an adult?
It helps the therapist find the easiest way in for that person. Embodiment is that early physical sensory stage of infancy. If a client is comfortable with movement, that's your door. Projection is next, like a toddler drawing or using blocks. If your client resists moving but will draw their feelings, you use that. And finally, role is when dramatic play begins around age 4. It's just a map to find their preferred channel of expression.
That's bringing a real scientific approach to it. You also mentioned a model called Basic pH, and it flagged something I didn't expect. Humor.
Yes, Basic pH is a resource model, and under the category of imagination, humor is listed as a vital resource.
So being able to laugh at your problems is actually therapeutic.
It's a huge sign of health. Think about it. When you can genuinely joke about something painful, you have already transcended it, you've gotten some distance, you're looking at it from that as-if perspective. It's a clear signal of healing.
Let's talk applications. This sounds perfect for something like bullying. How would DT handle that?
Well, the first thing they're trained not to do is ask the client to reenact the bullying. That would just be re-traumatizing.
That makes so much sense.
Instead, the focus is all on the future. The goal is to help the victim develop a new alternative role, to embody what it feels like to be a hero or a protector or someone resilient. They're rehearsing a new self.
I love that. Rehearsing a new future. That connects right back to those developmental roots you mentioned, especially this theory of neurodramatic play.
Ah, yes. What's fascinating here is that neurodramatic play, or NDP, goes way back. It looks at the 6 months before birth and the 6 months after.
Yeah, really.
That early. And it argues there are 3 types of play that are essential. First is sensory play, messy play. Babies playing with their food, sticky stuff. It's how they learn to create order out of chaos.
Okay.
Second is rhythmic play. That's the rhythm between the mother and child. The heartbeat, rocking, games like pat a cake, it builds connection.
And a third.
This is the mind blower. Dramatic play. It starts just hours after birth.
Hours.
Imitation. The baby imitates the mother's face and the mother imitates the baby back. That is the first dramatic act. The first as if.
Wow. And that leads to the conclusion in our sources that civilization is founded on drama, not on language.
It flicks the whole script.
Right.
It says, before we had words, we had imitation, we had embodiment. And if you connect that to bullying, Erickson says basic trust is formed in the first 18 months. If that environment is mistrustful, the child is set up to become a victim. And kids are capable of bullying by age 3.
So what does this all mean? We started out thinking drama therapy might be something frivolous, but
Yeah.
what we found is this incredibly rigorous, structured field. It uses the as if to help people become, I guess, the heroes of their own news stories.
It's a deeply researched system that uses the body and distance to build confidence, to build a new identity. But the culture we live in makes its most basic tool playfulness really hard to access.
Yeah. I mean, your whole life in school, you're told, don't be so childish, stop playing around, be serious.
Right. We associate play with being unserious. So the educational system basically makes sure we never go back to that playground again. We become estranged from it.
And that's the final thought to leave you with, isn't it?
I think so. If that kind of free, authentic play only happens when we feel very, very secure, like in deep intimacy, what does that say about the trust we allow ourselves in our public lives? How much healing, how much potential are we suppressing every single day just because we've been taught to believe that playing is over?